Hey guys, what's up? It's Samantha and I am back with my what I read in March video, which will be definitely shorter than what I read in February. I think I read 16 books in the month of March, so won't be like my 22 or 23 or however many it was in February. So once again, I have my Goodreads pulled up because I could not remember all of this stuff off the top of my head, even if I tried. And honestly, when you read this much, it's really easy to like forget. Like not what the books were about, but I definitely have trouble remembering character names and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get into it. So the first book I read in the month of March was Queen of Air and Darkness, which I have behind me because I really like the cover of it. It's probably my least favorite out of the Dark Artifices trilogy. I feel like there's been a billion reviews. I don't want to spoil it. If you're a fan of this series, it's definitely a must read. Part of why I didn't like it is a lot of the characters from the Mortal Instruments become more primary characters again, and I did not like the Mortal Instruments. I like all the other series and all the other books that she's written since then. The Mortal Instruments is sort of important to read to understand this world, but they were not my favorite book series, and so it sort of soured the ending of my favorite trilogy so far that she's written, because so many of the Mortal Instruments characters end up in this series, like the back half especially. I really loved the first half. I was like, this is going to be an easy 5 stars, and then there's a turning point in the book, which if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, and everything after that, I was sort of like, So that was a little rough for me. I actually read this, both the physical book, the ebook, because I read a lot of this, about half of this on my plane to and from San Francisco, and I also had the audiobook, so I would like get to the end of a chapter and then I'd switch to audio and then switch back and that sort of thing. So I have 3, because I used an Audible credit for the audio, I bought the ebook for my Kindle, and I have the physical book, so I have a problem. The next book I read was an ARC, and when does this come out? This comes out May 7th, but the next book I read was Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali, and I really enjoyed this. It's a cute contemporary romance featuring 2 Muslim main characters, and most of it takes place in Qatar. Most of it takes place in Doha, which is a city in Qatar, and it is just a really cute story that actually integrates both characters' faith into how they choose to go about starting a relationship and continuing a relationship, and it was just really interesting. I feel like I learned a lot about what dating looks like in that culture. I feel like I've read other books with like girls, like I read A Very Large Expanse of Sea, that one. Like she wears the hijab, but she is dating like a white boy, and like it was very different. Like obviously her faith was part of her life, but like we didn't hear a lot about like her thoughts about faith, and like she wasn't, like she kisses the guy in that book and stuff, which is like fine. I'm not like saying one is wrong, but it was just very interesting to like read a book about like what 2 very devout, like what that looks like if they're following like certain rules and stuff about not touching and like involving the parents from the get-go and like that sort of stuff. I'd never read a book featuring characters like that, so I thought it was really cute. Like even with all those, like them both wanting to do it like the right way, it was still a really cute contemporary romance with like a really sweet ending and just really great character development, and I just had a smile on my face the whole way through, so I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's one of the best contemporary romances. Like, I mean, there's a romance, but there's a lot of like other stuff going on with like Islamophobia and racism and that kind of stuff that was really well handled, and the main character's aunt is like my favorite character in the whole book. So the next book I read was An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and this is like a series that I don't know why I didn't start this earlier. I think I thought I wasn't going to like it. I don't know why. Like, I think I had grouped it in my head with other series that have sort of not been my thing, and the best way I can describe this is fantasy for reluctant readers. It is action-packed, it is fast-paced, the fantasy elements are smaller. The world building isn't info dumpy. It's very much like a militaristic focused book. So there's a ton of action, a ton of adventure, and I was so into it. It was recommended to me by another librarian friend of mine who's a little bit older, and I really trust her judgment. And she was like sent me a direct message on Goodreads and was like, you have to read this book right now. And I loved it. I was like, why did I not think I would like this book? I thought it was gonna be, I think because they had blurbed each other's books, I hated The Wrath and the Dawn. Like it's one of 2 books that I have a shelf for really terrible books, and it's that book and Gilded Wolves. Like those are my 2 least favorite books I've ever read. And so they had blurbed each other's books, and so I assumed that An Ember in the Ashes would be a similar style to The Wrath and the Dawn, and it wasn't at all, and I loved it. And then I also read the sequel, which is like A Torch Against the Night, and I loved it too. Not quite as much as the first one. I gave them both 5 stars, both of them 5 stars, but like the first one is so good. And then I started the 3rd one, and then I was like, the 4th one doesn't come out for another 1.5 years. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to reread all of these before the 4th one comes out anyways, because I'm not gonna remember half of what happened, because I read so much and it all just blurs together. So I'm kind of like, I might wait and then do a reread and then read the 3rd one and then jump right into the 4th one. And also like it hurts when you like have one book left and like you just want to finish it all, and I don't want to wait like with a broken heart for 1 year. So I might just wait and read all of them again, but I really, really love this series. The next book I read was Serious Moonlight by Jenn Bennett, and I read Starry Eyes by Jenn Bennett last year, and that was one of my favorite contemporary books I read in 2018. It was a cute romance, but it was like really well written. It was funny. It was great, like great side characters and just a really fun story. And so I was really looking forward to Serious Moonlight because I had enjoyed Starry Eyes so much, Starry Eyes, whatever, last year so much. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was so cute. So this is kind of like on that border between teen and new adult. The characters are both out of school. They are 18. And it follows our main character, Birdie, who is a huge fan of murder mysteries, and she wants to be a private investigator or like a detective when she grows up, and she doesn't really know what she's doing with her life. Her very controlling, protective grandmother has just passed away, and so she's finally able to like explore this world and, well, our world. And she gets her first job working at a hotel where there's a very cute boy who is the driver for the hotel. And the kicker is, this happens off page before the book even begins, Birdie has hooked up with this guy in, what's his name, Daniel? Dan, I think it's Daniel, right? Oh, I remembered names! I remembered both of their names without having to look at that's how you know this is a good book. I remembered their names. And so Daniel and Birdie had like hooked up in the back seat of Daniel's car after briefly meeting at a diner. And so she sees him, she's like mortified that she did this because she'd never done that before. And she finds out that this guy's also working at the hotel where she just got her first job, and she is freaking out, and he's very like suave and charming, and like he's trying to figure out what happened because he's baffled too, and then they both are just like adorable, and there's this mystery. He tries to recruit her on like solving a mystery together, and it's just like full of adorable scenarios, and it takes place in Seattle, and it was just so cute. So I really, really enjoyed this one. If you are a fan of Jenn, a fan of Jenn Bennett, check this out when it comes out. It comes out April 16th, I think. It's like 2 weeks from today. So when it comes out, check it out. It's really cute. Oh, actually, I think this one on the really bad bookshelf too, with Gilded Wolves and Wrath in the Dawn, was Again But Better by Christine, I can't pronounce her last name, whatever, the Poland Bananas girl from, I've never actually watched a single one of her videos. I just I didn't really know who she was, but I had seen a bunch of people put this on there, like what they were looking forward to for 2019, so I was like, oh, I'll get the arc of it. Like the blurb sounded interesting about it. So basically the concept of this book is, and like the concept of this book, I want to say like the concept of this book isn't bad. Like the idea I think is a really good idea. I think the execution was poor, but I did see her writing develop throughout the book, and the second half of the book was far less cringeworthy than the first half. So I can't totally write her off as an author. And like I said, I'm not a fan of hers. If you're a fan of hers, you might enjoy this book more than I did. But basically this book follows, what's her name? Shane. So Shane is going to England to study abroad, and she is a pre-med student, and she is, she's lied to her parents, and she's actually going to do creative writing in this study abroad program, so she'll only be taking creative writing courses, which will put her behind for her pre-med plans. I think part of why I had issues with this book is because I was also pre-med and also decided not to follow that career path, and I ended up becoming a librarian. So I like thought that this could be really interesting because it would be relevant to my life. But basically the writing, especially in the first half, was incredibly cringy. The dialogue and the writing was juvenile, both in tone and content. The interactions between the characters are painful. I posted on Instagram like some particularly bad blurbs. The writing was choppy, and it felt like it needed a rewrite. Like it needed another big, like it could have been put off being published for a little bit. The problems with the writing weren't as bad in the second half of the book, but there were like, the characters were supposed to be 19 or 20 in the first half. They're college juniors. So 20, 21, that's how old, if you're a college junior, you're like 20 or 21. And they acted like they were 13, like the way I see middle schoolers acting with each other at the library, where they're pulling each other's hair and slapping each other. And I just couldn't move past the writing. It was just bad. Like I said, it got better as the book went on, which is why it was like, I gave it a 1.5 stars. If the whole book had been written the way the back half was, it probably would have been a 2 or a 2.5 star, probably like a 2 star for me. But there is like a fantastical element in the middle of the book, which sort of came out of nowhere. I wasn't opposed to, like, it was sort of like a do-over of like, so the first half of the book, she's the study abroad program and everything goes to shit. And 6 years later, she's interviewing for residencies. Basically, they are whisked back in time. Shane and this guy that she had a crush on in London are whisked back in time, and they get to do their semester abroad over again. So it's sort of like, again, but better the first time, because she's doing college again, but better, like with creative writing, and then the whole thing gets done over again. And she, so like I didn't hate the second half. I thought it was a really interesting concept. Like I like the idea of going back as like a 20-something and seeing how your life turned out, and going back and like redoing a pivotal moment that would have changed your life and maybe made you happier or more fulfilled. I do think that's a really interesting concept, and like I said, I can't completely write her off as an author, but this book I feel like needed a lot more work, especially in the first half, to be like publishing level ready. It kind of read like reading fan fiction or something on Wattpad. It just needed a heavier editorial hand, and to like go back and rewrite to match, you know, just. So I would not recommend this book unless you are a huge fan of Christine. From what I've gathered, from what other people have said, the main character's like quirky, awkward personality, which is not really a personality, like her flaw is that she's clumsy, which is not a flaw. But I guess she's very much like Christine, I guess. Like I said, I've never watched any of her videos, so I don't know what she's like, and after reading this book, I wasn't tempted to watch any of her videos. So I think if you're a fan of hers, you would probably like this book much more than I did, because it basically reads like Christine is the main character of the book. So those are my thoughts. do with it what you will. I would not recommend this book. It's pretty bad. The next book I read in March was What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. This is told in 2 perspectives, with one character written by Adam and one character written by Becky, and I really liked the chapters written from Adam's perspective. I'm starting to think that Becky Albertalli, other than Simon, is maybe not the author for me. I found being in, there's 2 characters, there's Ben and Arthur, and Ben was written by Adam and Arthur was written by Becky. And I really liked Ben. Like, Ben was a cool character, and he was very, like, relatable. His friend group was awesome. And then Arthur was awful. He was just terrible. Like, it was exhausting being inside of his head. His ideas about relationships were so off, and, like, he reacts, like, over the top about everything, and it was just unhealthy relationship dynamics, and like the concept, like the meet cute at the beginning, I really liked the beginning, and then as it went on and we were with Arthur for longer, I started dreading Arthur's chapters, and I was like, Ben's the only character I care about here. So yeah, it was just exhausting being in his head, and he didn't really seem to like learn that the way he behaved was like awful. Which is also, like, it's one thing if a character does something awful and then they learn throughout the book that, like, oh, that's not a healthy way to behave in relationships. Like, I was really wrong to, like, put my anxieties on that person, or to, like, get furious with them about a completely, like, non-rage-worthy thing. But he doesn't really seem to learn that here, so it was cute. Like, it was a fluffy read. The audiobook was good. It has 2 narrators, and I liked the audiobook. I switched between the audiobook, and I ended up switching like the back half into the physical book because Arthur's chapters were so cringeworthy that I couldn't listen to them anymore. So I just switched to the book so I could kind of like skim faster, read faster through Arthur's chapters. But I did really like Ben. So I'm interested to check out, I've never read anything else by Adam Silvera, so now I'm like, I kind of want to read more Adam Silvera. The next book I read was also an arc, and when does this come out? It was Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno, and it comes out May 14th, so in like a month and a half. And this was like a really charming, cute book. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's a contemporary romance with some magic realism elements to it. Like, you're not quite sure if it's actually magic or if it's just coincidence, but there's like a lot of like the family has like some witchy healer kind of vibes. Like there's Santeria and that kind of stuff, and it's very interesting. I like those elements of it. The story, the first 80% I loved. I was like, oh, this is going to be a 4 or 4.5. All of the characters are Latinx, and there's like a lot of like Cuban heritage. It takes place in this really adorable sleepy seaside town in Florida. There's all of these like quirky, it kind of reminded me of like Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, like all these quirky townies, and they're all overly involved in each other's lives and gossiping, and it was adorable and I loved it. And then like the last 20% the ending felt very rushed, and I was like, wait, what's happening? And like I kept going back and rereading, and the ending fell flat for me. So I would still recommend it. It would be a great poolside or beach read if you're going on vacation. It's just a really fun book, and it has a lot of, like, a huge cast of really funny, great characters. So I would still recommend checking it out. But yeah, you know, I really liked, like, I've been really enjoying reading and seeing like, how many more, like, contemporary romance novels are coming out just featuring characters with different, like, diverse backgrounds, and how it's just like normal, like that's just how it is. And I really love seeing that, because it felt like for a while every book with diverse characters was like really sad and depressing, and I'm like, there should just be all kinds of books with diverse characters. So it's really cute to see these like charming, adorable contemporary romances coming out featuring characters from all different kinds of backgrounds. So I would recommend reading it if you're a fan of contemporary romance. It was a really cute, like, a cute beach read. So the next book, this was again a really surprise book for me. This was also an arc, and I 5-starred this, which I was not expecting to. This comes out June 18th, and it was All of Us with Wings by Michelle Ruiz Keil. I really hope I'm pronouncing her name right. The cover of this book does not match the content of this book, and so I did not... This book, okay, so this book follows this, we kind of have two perspectives. We have, and I can't remember anyone's names, even though I love this book. Oh, this is so bad. So we have 12-year-old Pallas, Pallas Athena, who is the daughter of a rock star. He is part of, like, this punk rock band sort of situation, and he was a teenage father, so I felt like old. The adult, I was like picturing like this 45-year-old like seasoned rock star. He's 28. He has a 12-year-old kid because he was a teenage dad. But all of these bandmates and sort of these people that they've brought into their found family that tour with the band, that are part of this rock and roll and drugs and sex lifestyle, they all live in this Victorian, really atmospheric house in San Francisco, and they sort of find this girl, Xochi, who is she's Latina, and she has run away from home. She is pretending she's 17, but she's pretending that she's like 20, and she is hired as the governess for Pallas, because they're like, we need someone to watch this girl while we're busy being rock stars. And it's just this really quirky, atmospheric, it's like really dark and witchy, and like it has these Victorian vibes, but it takes place in like contemporary San Francisco, and there's all these like magic realism elements, and there's chapters that the point of view is from a cat. Like a cat with magical reader's advisory abilities. Like the cat works at a bookstore and like can guide people to their perfect book. And there's like all these like gnomes and trolls and magic fish in San Francisco. So there's this like underbelly of magic in the city, and it's just so incredibly like atmospheric. And I did not like the cover's like bright blue, and like it needs a better cover. It was so cool. Like it was a very unique book. So Xochi and Pallas end up summoning two water babies who are like these vengeful, like avenging spirits. They're trying to like right all of the wrongs that have been done to Xochi, and then there's sort of like, you have Xochi on the brim, like the cusp of adulthood. Like she's almost 18. She's like not a child, but she's not an adult. And it sort of deals with like, when does someone stop being a child and start becoming an adult? And then you also have Pallas, who's on that cusp between childhood and being a teen, and she's freaking out about becoming a teen. She's freaking out about leaving childhood behind. So you have these two girls that are like both on the cusp of the next stage of their lives, and there's, you know, like they have very different reactions to it, and I really liked how that was explored, and how like those in-between times of adolescence can be really difficult. But this book read a little more new adult than teen. Xochi is definitely treated as an adult in this book. There's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of rock and roll, but it was so beautifully done and it's just so atmospheric. Like that's like literally, I was reading this book and I'm like, this book is just vibes for days. Like I want this book, like I just wanted to like live in it. It was so cool, and just, I haven't read something so unique in a really long time, because everything just, especially when you're reading as many books as I'm reading, it all starts to blur together and like feel the same, and this book was just so beautiful. I definitely don't think this is the book for everyone, but it was definitely the right book for me. Like if you are a fan of the Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender, which I loved, if you are a fan of that book, you will definitely love this, and I'm so excited for it to come out, and like I cannot recommend this book highly enough. 5 out of 5 stars. Easy. This is definitely going to be in my like top 10 books of 2019. It was just gorgeous and beautiful, and I can't wait for you guys to read it too. The next book I read was also an advanced copy, and This Was Our Pact by Ryan Andrews, and it comes out on June 11th, and this was a really adorable, sort of like middle grade to tween graphic novel that features, like, follows two boys who go on this sort of magical adventure quest that's very, like, reminiscent of childhood make-believe, and it reminded me a little bit of, like, the Phantom Toll Booth and sort of those elements. You meet a bunch of quirky characters and just really adorable, really cute. The illustrations were beautiful, and I would recommend checking it out when it comes out if you are a fan of, like, quirky middle grade fantasy and that sort of stuff. It was really sweet and adorable, and I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. I think it was between, like, a 4 and a 5 on that one, but it was really, really cute, and it was just so charming, and I would really recommend checking it out. It would be, like, a great, like, book to read under the stars this summer. It was so cute. Then the next book I read was That's Not What I Heard by Stephanie Kate Strohm, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book, but I could see why other people would not. It is a farcical take on high school gossip. So it is meant to be completely over the top, and it sort of is like a commentary on, like, celebrity gossip, but within, like, a high school setting, and you sort of follow this gossip and these rumors as it evolves, and there's a ton of point of view characters, all these different people, including teachers, which I think is part of why I like this so much, because I am an adult who works with teens, and I identified with the teachers in this school so much, and I was dying. Like, I was laughing hysterically the whole way through this book, and it was different. Like, I've never read a book quite like it. It was very, very, like, funny. It was so over the top, and I really liked that. Like, it's my sense of humor. So it was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. If you are someone who, I could see someone who isn't, like, that type of reader maybe being annoyed by how over the top it is, but I was just like, oh my gosh, this is hysterical, and I loved it. I read it so fast. It was so much fun. So that 5 out of 5 stars was for how much I enjoyed that book, was that level of entertainment. Then the next book I read was These Rebel Waves by Sara Raasch? There's 2 ways, I don't know how to pronounce it. This book follows our main character, Lou, who is the daughter of 2 government officials on this island, Grace Leray, which has magic. And it's not magic in the sense of, like, magic is a skill. It's magic in the sense that, like, magic is botany and herbology, and you use these magical plants to create potions. And Lou grew up, this island has been in a state of, like, turmoil and war for most of Lou's life, and there's been a few years of peace. And there's all these different peace talks going on between all these different groups that have sort of immigrated to Grace Leray, and then also with sort of, like, colonial US, and, like, there's Britain, like, the equivalent of Britain, and they kind of want the island back, but there's, like, these peace treaty negotiations, and then things go terribly wrong, and Lou partners with this infamous smuggler pirate guy, Vex, who is, like, charming and swashbuckling, and I actually really liked Vex as a character. They team up to sort of fix these problems, and then they find out all this corruption that's going on, and then there's also a 3rd character, Ben, who is the crown prince of the, like, the mainland area, what's it called? Agrid? Yeah. Argridian? Yeah. Argrid. That's it. And this was okay. It was really dense, especially the first half. I felt like it was simultaneously info dumpy, and also I had no idea what was going on. The world was there's a lot of, like, political stuff going on, and you're dropped right into it, and all of these groups have, like, weird different names and I couldn't keep them straight. So like they were talking about all these like political relationships and the history of this island and all this stuff going on, and I was like, what? I don't know who any of these people are because I can't keep them straight and I have no idea what's going on. So you read from all three perspectives, but it was really, the thing that was off-putting to me about this book is that the perspectives weren't split up by chapter. It would literally just be like one paragraph was from, like you'd be reading a few pages from like one person's perspective, and then it would just change to the next person's, and there wasn't like a lot of delineation because there weren't split up by chapters. There wasn't like a line or like dots or something between them, and I was very thrown off several times, especially at the beginning. Like I said, it was really dense at the beginning, but it picked up, like once I understood the world and how it worked and I was able to tell the groups apart, it started to make a lot more sense. But like it just, I felt like I was dropped in and there was so much information and I couldn't tell anyone apart, and that just like really threw me off. Something I find really interesting about this book and what I thought was done really well is the our grid has this it's like a theocracy, and it's this very oppressive religion, but there's like the crown prince is like openly gay, and that's fine. Like sexuality, like you're not supposed to have sex until you're married, whether you're gay or straight, but like being gay isn't a sin. And I just really liked that it wasn't another book about oppressive religion where like people who are gay are oppressed. Like it was just a normal part of whatever, and the same like rules about not having sex before marriage and being like chaste and whatever applied to gay people just as much as straight people, and no one bats an eye that anyone's gay, which was just really interesting. I've never seen a religious system set up in a book like that before. There were bits of really witty dialogue, and I can see like there's like bits of the writing that I really enjoyed, and then there's parts where it's like just repetitively introspective, where like Lou keeps bringing up the same thoughts about the same things and the same worries over and over and over again, and I was like, girl, I get it, like you don't need to tell me for the 20th time, like I know. So I can see like elements that I really liked about the writing. There's moments where the dialogue was just so funny and witty and hilarious, and then there were other times it felt like a drag. And I just wish it had been more consistently funny. That is my very rambly. So it was a 3. It was like a 3 out of 5. Like especially by the end, and I'm reading the sequel, and the sequel's been easier to get into because I already understand the world and stuff, and it starts with like action. Like from the get-go, it's just like action, action, action. So I can like, I'm enjoying the sequel more, but like I said, just took me a while to get into that one. Then the next one I read was also by Sara Raasch, and that was Snow Like Ashes, which is a series I had never read, and I know that was what she was known for before. It's like a dystopian fantasy trilogy, which were sort of a dime a dozen for about a decade, and I gave this a 2.5. It was completely average. I think I just rated it 2 stars on Goodreads. I'm looking at it, I did rate it 2 stars on Goodreads, and it was sort of how it reminded me of A Court of Thorns and Roses, but for 12-year-olds. So there was a lot of like jaw tightening and growling and snarling and that kind of stuff, but no sex. So I kind of felt the same way about it as I felt about A Court of Thorns and Roses. It was just a lot of like purple prose, and I wasn't really, like, I'm not invested in the series. It was my fall asleep audiobook for like a week and a half. So, you know, it was just meh. I would recommend it more for younger readers. Like I could see me as an 11 or 12-year-old having really enjoyed this book, but as an adult reading it, it did not have adult readability. So if you haven't read it, there's no reason to go back and read it. There's nothing special about it. It was just meh. The next book I read was a contemporary romance, Only a Breath Apart by Katie McGarry, and it was pretty typical contemporary romance fare, very melodramatic. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and there was some like other stuff, like there's both the boy and the girl in the story come from abusive homes, which was, I didn't really like as much that they used like the boy coming in to save the girl from the abusive father sort of like trope. thing. Like, it felt a little bit more like, I don't know. There were like elements of it that I didn't really love that much, but I felt like it was very like soapy, like soap opera-y and like melodramatic, and I wanted to find out how it ended. So as far as like that type of contemporary romance is concerned, and there's no sex in it, so you could give it to a younger reader if they were okay with reading about domestic violence, which I didn't really think about. But yeah, it was pretty good for the kind of book it was. I'm not really a huge fan of that genre of contemporary romance. I like contemporary romance that's more like Jenn Bennett or Stephanie Kate Strohm, where it's more fun and like upbeat kind of contemporary romance and not so much the melodrama. So the next book I read, which I actually read, I didn't finish the third one. I finished the third one on April 1st, so we'll talk about that in April's video. I mean, I guess I could just talk about the whole series now because I read most of it in March. Was Caraval by Stephanie Garber, and I did have an arc for finale. My friend Sylvia put it best this way: these books are trash, but I'm a raccoon. Normally I will be the first person to call out, like, this book, the writing was meh. There was a ton of purple prose. There's plot holes for days. None of this makes sense, but I had so much fun reading Caraval, like Caraval, however you pronounce it. It was just really, really fun. It wasn't a great book, but it was a fun book. So I read it all in like one day, and then I jumped right into Legendary. I definitely think Caraval is the best out of the three of them. It had sort of like an Alice in Wonderland-esque, like nonsensical fantasy thing going on, which I liked. Like I said, there were plot holes, like you just couldn't think too hard about anything that was going on. And then the plot holes and the lack of world building consistency sort of made Legendary meh. And then I felt like finale really fell apart, because they were like, oh, remember how we said this was like, oh, you can do this, but you can't do that. But like, oh, just kidding, we broke the rules anyways, just so we could have this like weird plot change thing in the third one. I don't know. But the first one was really fun. I did like Legendary, because Legendary also has, they're playing another game of Caraval in Legendary. And so it had that sort of series of clues and the game element, and still like this magical like carnival game thing going on around it that anchored some of the sillier, more dramatic relationship things. There was still like this underlying like adventure that we were going on. And then the third one was basically 50% of it. So the first one is narrated by Scarlett, and the second one is narrated by her younger sister, or like from the point of view of her sister Tella. And then the third one is split between Scarlett and Tella, and I liked Scarlett's story in finale much better than Tella's. Tella's is basically her just waffling back and forth between two men who don't love her, like can't love her. That's like part of the whole thing. And she's like basically just making out with one or the other back and forth. Like they're making out for her whole part of the book. And I did not like Tella as a character. I thought she was just really stupid. I liked Scarlett more, and some of it was just so convoluted, but it was still fun. In fact, like I still flew through finale. Like it was still a fun read. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, and I like read all of them back to back, and I was like, I still have no idea what's going on. But it was just melodramatic, which it was like fun. It was like, I feel like the reason people watch reality TV. It was like that kind of book. I would definitely read Caraval again. I might read Legendary again. I just don't, finale was just so eh. But they were such fast books. Like I read all of them in like a few hours each. They were not hard. They were just mindless, easy entertainment. So if you're looking for mindless, easy entertainment, I thought they were really fun. I gave Caraval a 4. The 4 was entirely, it would have been like writing quality, it would have been like a 2, but I enjoyed it so much I gave it a 4. It was like terrible, terrible trash, and I loved it. And then Legendary, I think I gave a 3.5, and then finale I gave a 2.5. I just didn't, I don't know. And then I also read the no, that was it. That was everything except book I read in April. So I will just count finale in there so I could just talk about the trilogy all at once. But that was everything I read in March, which it feels like I was just talking because I just did my video for what I read in February, and like I feel like I read some of those books like a year ago. I am already at 55 books, I think. Yes, I've read 55 books in 2019 so far, and it is April 2nd. So all of them kind of start to blend together in my head a little bit. Keep in mind, this is my job. I have to read books for my job. I'm a teen librarian, and I read a lot of advanced copies as part of that job and for like collection development and that kind of stuff. So reading is literally my job, which is why I'm able to read so much. So don't feel bad if you only read like 5 books, because I read full time basically. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm really excited to do more bookish videos soon. I'll talk to you in my next one, guys. Bye.